Hey guys, this is Dave. Welcome back to another video. Today is going to be a little bit different. This past week, I participated in a space investor community event, which actually happens every week, hosted by Jacob Keaton. So if you are interested in participating in an X Spaces weekly event, just chatting about space talks and the latest news, I highly recommend you give him a follow and check those out every week, 8 p.m. I believe Wednesdays. I'd have to double check that. But anyway, this week he had a special guest, which was author and creator of the film I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with, Wild Wild Space, and he is the creator of Core Memory, which is a podcast. They're making videos and articles about the future of tech and space and a lot of cool stuff, futurism. So if you follow this channel, you probably enjoy that as well. I am a subscriber myself. Definitely worth checking out. But anyways, we had the chance to talk to Ashlee about all our favorite space companies that he's very well knowledgeable with, because he was basically embedded in these companies for long periods of time while writing his book. So interesting to get his perspective on things and some thoughts on what was going on behind the scenes, and a lot of the unspoken stuff that we don't see in the proper, press releases and stuff like that. So if you're interested in this, unfortunately, it is only audio because it was originally recorded in an X Spaces, but I do think it's worth a listen, so I'm going to share it here. Also, if you're interested, I did just start a Spotify account called Dave G at the request of someone in the Discord community. And I fully understand, especially with these long form pieces of content, that it can be more convenient to have Spotify than YouTube, because it keeps playing when you turn off your screen, or if you're out for a run or something like that. Spotify can be much more convenient. It's got 9 followers now, my Spotify podcast, so I guess you could say I'm a pretty big deal. But yeah, do a search for Dave G, and maybe I'll link that if you want to check it out. Obviously, YouTube helps out me more because I get advertising revenue and stuff like that, but figure anyone who prefers Spotify, I'll post the longer form stuff on there for you to check out. Shorter videos, 15 minutes or less, probably won't be showing up on there. Hope you do enjoy this chat. I did get a few questions in myself, but it was part of a larger community event, so there's lots of other people, names you may be familiar with as well, asking Ashlee some questions, and I thought it was pretty interesting. Do subscribe if you haven't already. It would be very much appreciated, and let's dive into the community discussion with Ashlee Vance.
I've heard you mention this a few times before. You have this, and I would almost call it like a talent for catching you just kind of say, within a few minutes of meeting somebody, of like, oh yeah, I don't know where he's going to go, but this guy's going to make it, kind of thing. He said that about Peter Beck after you first met him early on. And I was just curious, do you is there other areas where you feel like that talent has kind of sprung out to you, either in the space industry or maybe the broader tech industry as well?
Yeah, well, it's only happened a few times where I was just totally certain that these people were going to succeed. But yeah, they really do stand out. I met the Collison brothers, Patrick and John, who started Stripe when it was like 8 people in a room, and you could just tell after talking to them for an hour, I was like, I'm not generally that interested in fintech stuff, but I was like, oh, whatever you guys do, you're going to succeed. And then another time that always jumps out, I was much younger, but I remember meeting Diane Green from VMware, and in the early days of VMware, the products that they were originally selling was like not really what turned into this multi-billion-dollar company. But I just remember her being so impressive, and it's like a really hard thing to put words around, to codify. It's just this feeling you get where the people are. It's this combination of obvious intelligence and focus and drive, and I think kind of like a clarity that they're not really selling you on something because whatever they're doing is just so ingrained in their like body and mind that you could kind of feel that, and you get the sense that um they're actually capable of pulling it off, or pulling off just about anything. And yeah, I remember Peter stood out like that when the first time I went to Rocket Lab was like 2016. And I'd been, because I had done the book on Elon and had done so much reporting on SpaceX, I was just getting bombarded with like there were so many rocket startups back then, maybe like 80 or 90. And it was really hard to tell who was real and who was just totally full of shit. And everybody had like a decent website and big ideas. And people kept telling me about Peter, but the odds of someone knowing what they were doing in New Zealand was really low, just because it has no history of aerospace at all. And then when you looked at Peter's background among all these rocket startups, I had never run across, they still all had like MIT PhDs in aerospace as, at least the CTO, if not the founder. And the idea of someone who hadn't even been to college being real just seemed really far-fetched to me. But then I flew to New Zealand and hung out with Peter, and it was just obvious that he was a more than maybe like anyone I've ever met. Just this, like he was like put on this earth to be an engineer, and it just like oozed out of him. It was so obvious, and I was like shocked at how far they had come. And so, yeah, I think there's probably like a handful of people that I've interviewed. I suspect I've probably interviewed like more startups. I've got to be close to the most ever in the last 20 years, I think. And you get good feelings from a lot of people, and you get bad feelings from a lot, but there's only a handful that stood out as like blindingly obvious.
Yeah, man. I don't just here. I don't know. It gives me. I'm this probably because this problem for being an investor. I'm also a super fanboy of the company of Peter. So just I don't know. I get goosebumps when I hear something like that because it's like, wow, this is this is somebody special, and he's kind of proven that with what he's done and what they've done built to it as a company. But it's really cool to hear about it from somebody who's gotten that chance to sit down and talk with them and have that like first person impression, because everything I'm seeing is secondary.
That's like for people who, I mean, all this stuff is a team effort, right? You don't make a rocket without a team. And I don't want to take away from anyone, because Rocket Lab's full of really impressive engineers. There is it's like, it's hard some of this is hard to put into words. If you've hung out with the people who were at Rocket Lab in the early days, it's like, for a big chunk of this company's beginning, it really was like Peter, and he was building all this stuff, but he made propellants by himself in this like garden shed, and all these engines. And there were a handful of times where I think Rocket Lab was up against engineering challenges that might have been kind of like unsolvable. And Peter would never say this out loud, but there were a few of these moments where I think he basically like went away for a day and figured out the thing the company needed to figure out to get to the next stage. And I think he's got to be. I'm totally not trying to just like Peter fanboy. I think he's probably like one in a billion. I just think this is like, he's like a savant, really.
I'm gonna, because I didn't I'm horrible at this stuff, so I didn't prep a question list. But my wonderful friends here who are gonna like other speakers, so I wanted to get to both on stage, get a chance to talk to you for a minute. Space investor, I think you had your hand up.
Sure. Thanks, Jacob. And first of all, sir, it's an honor. Your book definitely got me and a lot of space nerds deeper into space investing, especially with the incredible job you did introducing the company to the average person. So once again, thank you very much for all your hard work. It's been quite a journey since then. So in your book, and we're talking about obviously when the Evans went on sale, you chronicled the rise of Planet, Rocket Lab, Astra, Firefly. You talked about Peter Beck, Chris Camp. You touched on Musk, Bezos, Branson, and their part into the whole commercial space economy. If you had to write part 2 of that book today, which space company or founders in that field would you add to that narrative? Or who do you think is pushing the frontier now and could be the new name we're talking about in the next 5 to 10 years?
Oh, it's a tough question. I mean, it's probably like not the exciting answer you were looking for. Blue Origin is getting interesting finally, and I'm not sure anyone's ever like really chronicled super well what the hell happened there for 20 years and then how the ship is getting righted. But if you're thinking of like who's going to compete with SpaceX on some of the biggest stuff, it's probably going to be like a 3-horse race between Blue Origin, SpaceX, and Rocket Lab for a lot of this. And so they're really interesting. I think Varda is interesting. I like their idea. I mean, they're doing these like pharmaceuticals in space right now. I'm not fully convinced how big of a business that is, but they are the first to really start like thinking about doing proper manufacturing in space, and they have gotten much farther, much faster than people usually do in aerospace. And so there's something impressive there because, as you guys know, I mean, this whole industry is about delays and delays and delays and things not working. And I mean, they like have done these 4 launches now, maybe 5 of their capsules, and have done really, really well. I think we had that first wave of rocket startups, and the wheat has been separated from the chaff, and obviously some have gone bankrupt. And then you've got guys like Stoke Space that have survived and have a bit of a different approach. I think we're gonna have like a second run on rockets that try to make up for some of the mistakes that have happened in the past. So that will be interesting. I'm generally broadly skeptical of rocket companies. It's a terrible business. And it's like people just want to do it because it seems cool. It's very hard to make money, and as like anyone who's paying attention can see, SpaceX's most of its value is tied up in Starlink, and Rocket Lab clearly, has embraced this idea of being a space company as opposed to just a rocket company, which is the smart thing to do. And they actually, I think Peter's very clever because he doesn't, I think he's had a lot of the strategy for a long time and he doesn't really let it on. I think Rocket Lab is maybe like up there with Apple is one of the most secretive companies. It's actually, it manages to keep things secret. And so I think Peter generally has lots of things up his sleeve. We're trying to think who else is really interesting. It's,
I'm going to give you a hint, or maybe just a, I'm going to do it. The ASTS, are you familiar with them at all?
I knew you guys were going to ask me, and I see Twitter just like going nuts about them. And
Spaceball once loved.
The what happened is like I did the SpaceX reporting for the Elon book and then rolled straight into like, I don't know, it was like 8 years of rocket startups, rockets all over the world, a bunch of satellite companies. And by the time I was finishing Wild Wild Space and the book, I was just so burnt out. I couldn't think about space anymore because it had been like that, as you guys know, that book is fat. It was a lot of work, and the movie, the backstory behind getting that movie made. There should have been a movie about that. It was just like a pretty arduous process, and so I kind of burnt out right as they were taken off, so I've never given them like the requisite attention that I should have. I think we're in this moment where people are still probably underestimating how many satellites we're going to throw up, whether there's a tremendous business case for them or not. Like obviously people are going to make several rival constellations to Starlink. There's just no way countries and other players are going to let SpaceX have that whole thing. They're going to do everything in their power for that not to happen. So I think that gets you to like, I don't know, it's probably 120,000 satellites just from Starlink competition alone. So that's a lot of rockets that have to go up. And then still some interesting imaging stuff. The grand prize is like whoever figures out the next business model beyond communications and imaging in low Earth orbit. And maybe it's like space habitat stuff, or maybe it's manufacturing. I'm like broadly skeptical of the data centers in space, even though some of it makes sense. But I think the next person to get really rich in space is the one who figures out the next big idea of what you actually do when you're up there. And it's not like totally clear to me who that is yet.
Well, when you do find out, you'll be sure to let us all know on this side, right? So
Yeah.
it's early.
If you're a Core Memories subscriber, you'll be finding out.
There we go, and that's the second plug. Hey, if you get the Foundry, you'll get to know 2 weeks earlier. So
That's right.
hey, so I wanted to get started over here. Brett, I think you had your hand up second, and then just so I can say the order, I saw Dave Stock and then CK.
Hey, Jacob. Thanks for hosting us. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah, you're good.
Awesome. And thanks, Ashlee, for joining. We really enjoyed your book and your documentary. Yes, so we touched on Peter Beck. We know he's a quiet, secretive, and humble guy. I wanted to know, do you see that kind of carry over into the culture at Rocket Lab across the company, or what was the feeling there? And to expand on that, do you notice any drastic differences compared to the SpaceX culture, like out on the floor and everything?
I think both of those company cultures are like the peak of. They're obviously the peak, right? Because nobody else gets it right. So, I think Rocket Lab does have that kind of no nonsense, heads down, perfectionism. I think, as I've talked about this a little before, it was so fascinating getting to be, because there's the rocket startups that are in the book and the movie, but I was following the whole, I was following Relativity, Virgin, a whole bunch of others really as I was doing all my research. And so I was inside these places, and yeah, it's pretty fascinating. I think I grossly underestimated the culture part that emanates from a CEO. I think I always figured that I knew some of that was there, but once an organization gets to like a couple hundred people, it didn't really occur to me that the CEO would have that much influence over that many people, or that you can really ingrain something that endures over years and people coming in and out of a company. But it's clear that it does, and that Peter and Elon and Gwynne Shotwell and have something special that they inject into the company. So yeah, and I think there's a part of the Kiwi and Australian culture that is pretty in line with Peter. I mean, that's kind of why Peter's wired the way he is. I'm not sure he's humble. I think he can come off as humble, but I think Peter likes deep down the attention and doing well and being successful. But I do think there's like a just get shit done, hardworking part of the Kiwi and Aussie culture that Rocket Lab benefits from. And yeah, they're it's just like not like a showy like over the top sort of place. People are just doing their job. So yeah.
I was gonna mention. Oh, sorry, Brett. I was gonna say, like almost gonna contrast to the other company that was, at least their CEO was very showy. I feel like, Mr. Kemp gets a little bit of, a little less love than he maybe should, but, sorry. Anyway,
No, I mean, this comes up all the time from the movie, of course, in the book. And, I think you're right, because I think Chris is different and is on some other end of the spectrum. But what I always appreciated about Astra and Chris is that at least they were doing something different and they were going for it. And it's like, he's wired that way. And they were taking a shot, and there was like a period of time where, man, they were racing forward and they were building the rocket so fast, and they really were doing it in a different way. And obviously, some things kind of like bit them in the ass in the end, but there, there was just this period where even after Rocket Lab, and even after you had Virgin, Rocket Lab, you had kind of 3 or 4 viable small rocket makers. There were more appearing, and they were just doing the exact same thing. I just appreciated that at least Chris had a thesis that was different from other people.
yeah, I really appreciated, you had a line in the end of your book, I believe, it was something like, he did what he said he was going to do. He wasn't the engineer. He came in there to promote the company and bring in the money, and he did that and did it well. So I always felt like he got a bad rap, because of, he is the public facing figure, but I always thought that, for his job, he did it well. His job wasn't building the rockets. His job was to get money to the company. He did that part well, and sold the company to the investors kind of thing.
I mean, he 100% did that. There's definitely people within Astra that would say they didn't love his management style. They thought he was underestimating some of the things that had to be done to make sure a rocket was reliable. And I think some of that is true. But I think you can make a pretty solid argument that the people that were supposed to know how to build a rocket kind of let him down a bit.
Yeah, there's I don't know. I always agreed with that take on it. But so I think next we had stock meetups, and then Dave seeking, and then Ant.
My question is around, there's also a similar question from the chat. So like whatever is happening between the president and Elon Musk, and also the possible passing of the big, beautiful bill. So what do you see the impact based on the bill passage on both on the SpaceX and Rocket Lab?
Well, I mean, it can only be good for Rocket Lab. If there's a degree to which the U.S. government is just so heavily dependent on SpaceX, and however anyone feels about Elon at any given moment doesn't matter to some degree, because it's like we have to get humans to the International Space Station. There's satellites that want to go up, and SpaceX is so far ahead of the competition on so many fronts that from a strategic perspective, the U.S. government is completely beholden to SpaceX. And so if Trump, unless he wants to like totally undermine himself, which he might, then there's only so much you can do. However, when they're sitting around trying to divvy up future contracts on all sorts of projects, I mean, Rocket Lab really stands to be the prime beneficiary unless Blue Origin can suddenly really up its cadence of launches. And so this can only be good for Peter. Once I saw Elon and Trump fighting, I was waiting. I think Rocket Lab only went up like 7% the next day after the fight. I thought it should have gone up higher, and it has been going up in the subsequent weeks. So I think people are kind of baking this in. And then the whole Golden Dome project, you have to figure there's really only three I mean, there's really only SpaceX and Rocket Lab that can get to space on a pretty regular basis at the moment. And so, if you got to fly stuff to space, then it's got to be on one of those two until the other folks get their house in order.
Yeah, man. I mean, the idea that like, yeah, there's not really an alternative for launch necessarily, or not a consistent one, but the idea that the future contracts and all this satellite space system stuff, I know it's a lot of the ASTS guys have, you know, because it's not the Starlink like terminals that there so much, but the like the direct to cells section is where there's big contrast. And then you know, there's a lot of dual use ideas that are coming out around what ASTS is doing with their Bluebird satellites, and there's a lot of military dual use. They got contracts for that already, and it's like the more and more that there could be conflict in there, the more opening, or the more that those people, you know, by administrative order are going to be looking at alternatives to the what would have been the, you know, predetermined kind of winner. It's anyways, my thought.
Yeah, and then, you know, these Starship explosions, I would just about guarantee that this has not been going according to plan, and that that these, you know, I'm the last person to jump on some company when a rocket explodes, because I know that that's part of the business, and I know that SpaceX has an incredible track record, and they're pushing the limits of what's possible. I also think things have been worse than Elon would have liked, and then that the company imagined. This is buying, you know, if Peter and Rocket Lab can somehow stick the landing on Neutron, which is very hard to do. New rockets always take longer than they're supposed to, but if they can, these Starship issues have bought Rocket Lab a lot of time to catch up on some pretty key areas.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I know the first launch they're going to do a water splashdown, but yeah, after that, yeah, the quicker they get that thing landed, it's just, yeah, the longer that Starship is delayed, it's the direct competition, and you're not dealing with the same thing. You know, you're not doing the electron Falcon 9 comparison or the neutron Starship comparison. It's longer they're in the same class competing. I mean, yeah, gives them more time. But I keep stepping in because this is all I do. I just chat and people listen to me, but I want to make sure I give more people time. So Dave G, do you want to jump on here, man?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me. Excited to pick Ashlee's brain. Space Investor, Rocket Lab have been in Planet and a few others. I'm kind of curious about Planet Labs right now, trying to figure out how I feel about them. Kind of thought the thesis was more of a environmental space hippie type situation, but lately they've been getting a lot of contracts in terms of defense. Do you think that kind of idealism of Will Marshall is giving way to pragmatism, and do you think they'll lean more into defense, or is that kind of happier thesis still intact as well?
I think it's intact, but I think if Will would not like any of what is about to roll out of my mouth, but I think it's all very true. You know, they've been going the defense direction for a long time, and the government direction. I think they had to make money, and once you go public, especially, there's a whole lot of things you got to do to keep the business growing. And so, you know, they still do the environmental stuff, and I know that all that's is very genuine and deep into Will's being. It comes from a true and honest place, but yeah, I think sometimes Will, you know, I don't know what he's like at night when he's alone with his thoughts, but I think he's maybe in a little bit of denial about the shape the business has taken. I always I always think of Pete Warden from my book, and if people have read it, and I'm pretty sure this was in the movie too. I mean, Pete was the Star Wars space laser guy running that program for Reagan, and was the antithesis of everything that Will stood for. And they used to fight about these things pretty openly. And if you look at the way history's shaken out, Pete was always pushing for cheaper rockets that could be launched more often, cheaper satellites that could be placed in space more often. And, I think it's like Pete's vision won out in the end. He got exactly what he wanted, even if he had to facilitate some space hippies for a while. I think Pete sort of had a master plan.
Well, I was like, sorry, Dave. I was, I was. Did you have a follow up there?
I guess maybe just to ask, so what's taken me aback over the past few years, I guess, is just, how slow the revenue growth has been from the commercial sector. And it's really been the defense and government sector kind of propping up Planet. Do you get the sense that the commercial sector, the demand will come back? Or do you think, EO is more government oriented?
Oh, it's always the weirdest thing about the imaging. I mean, you hear all these use cases that seem to make sense, and then it's either that they don't make sense, or that these companies really just haven't wrapped their heads around the tools that are at their disposal. But I think imaging, it just, when I sat back and think about it, I'm overwhelmed by what seems like this incredible opportunity to have this search engine for Earth. It just naturally feels like there would be lots of people that could figure out how to make tons of money from that, but it seems very hard to do. I mean, Orbital Insight, Planet had the satellites, and then Orbital Insight was trying to do the money making part from an analytics perspective really, really early on, and they could never sort of figure out the business on the commercial side. And I think it's just one of these, it's a conundrum that's always baffled me a little bit, but I'm skeptical. It's been a lot of years, and people just don't seem to have found something that's worth a lot of money to them.
Great. Thanks. Appreciate your comments on that.
Yeah. Seeking, did you want to go back to that? And then it was after that.
Yeah. Okay. Sounds great. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Excellent. Ashlee, huge fan. You're working on the space sector, obviously introduced a lot of us to what's going on out there in commercial space and got us interested in it. And then, of course, following on to all the futuristic tech that you comment on and deep dive into. Going to make this question a little bit of a forward-looking one, get you to use your crystal ball there. So, space kind of started out as a scientific and an exploratory kind of, get to the next horizon and challenge yourself. And it was NASA, it was government, it was, Russia and the Cold War and everything else. But nowadays, we're really starting to see a lot of technologies converge on the space sector. And you've mentioned so many of them. Earth observation is one, planetary defense, saving us from the next asteroid, the next dinosaur killer is another, quantum computing, obviously defense, biomedics, biotech in space, growing crystals and materials in space. When you're seeing all these things suddenly need access to space, is there a sector that really kind of excites you? Some of them are way out there. Space mining. Yeah, let's capture an asteroid that's got more gold than the planet could possibly use. Something like that's way out there. But for us investors, us that are maybe looking at other sectors that converge well with space, is there one that's really got you excited? And if so, follow-up question to that, are there companies within that you're excited about and that you see going somewhere?
Well, thank you for the kind words. I don't know if this is new because it sounds like you're really familiar with a bunch of my writing and everything. Yeah, I still think we're net underestimating Starlink. We're net underestimating this internet that blankets the Earth from space. I covered the Internet of Things idea for like 20 years before it even had a chance of becoming real. I mean, I think it's like it just seems obvious to me that we're going to have sensors in everything, everywhere, reporting back to the internet through the space internet, and just kind of measuring and quantifying so much stuff on Earth that we're not doing yet today. And I continue to believe that just this notion of having the internet, high speed internet, wherever you are at all times, I think we have not like fully appreciated what that could unlock. And so that's sort of obvious because everybody knows about Starlink. I still, I mean, look at the terrestrial internet and how many ideas have sprung from that over the last 25 years. And I just think we get a whole new raft of ideas from this always on, everywhere, high speed internet. So, that's kind of, I think in general, even though space is so exciting and there's lots of companies, I think probably most of the world's best software engineers remain in more traditional parts of the technology industry, and obviously are being consumed by things like AI. And so I still don't think really we've had enough of our most creative minds thinking about this and what could be done with it. So I expect that, over time, just to play out. You pointed to the materials stuff that seems like that seems real to me. I mean, you can do things with molecules and atoms in low Earth orbit that you just cannot do on Earth. And the stuff you could do, whether it's semiconductors or a better detergent or some kind of therapy, are all immensely valuable. And the cheaper and more frequent the rides to space get, it seems inevitable to me that we just run more and more experiments on that front, and all that stuff is high profit, very valuable. And so that's another reason I look at a company like Varda and think that they're onto something. The asteroid mining is crazy because I thought, like, it's always struck me as so far-fetched and asinine. I went to visit Astroforge a couple of years ago. They're actually saner and more practical in some ways that I thought. I still think it'll take a long time to play out, but that ended up striking me as more realistic than I thought it would be. And then I'll shut up in a second, but I just along the lines of everything I've just been saying, I think people are mostly also underestimating that we are for sure on this path of mimicking the Earth's communications and data infrastructure that is here on Earth. We are very much going to be doing that right in low Earth orbit. What we're seeing now is a tiny fraction of what's coming, and this is, to me, the next great infrastructure build out, and it's going to be many billions of dollars. And so I think people are underestimating like what stage of this we're at. I think we're at the earliest days.
Go ahead, CK.
I was just going to say, Ashley, what a well thought out answer. Absolutely brilliant. Really appreciate your time on here tonight. And I think you kind of segued into our next panel speaker here. So thank you again for that, Ashley.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, I was gonna give a brief little introduction to this next guy. This is Ann Penman, and he is one of the more well known retail investors in AST SpaceMobile. And I would say, if you're okay with it, Anthony, man, you should evangelize him just a little bit, because he sounds like he is a true AST supporter. He just doesn't know it yet.
Hey, Ashley, thanks for spending time with us. Really appreciate it. And I loved your book, and of course saw the movie as well. But yeah, no, I'm fully in agreement with you about the next generation of communications being space-based. And I actually, came up, I wanted to just offer up, if you're ever interested, happy to talk for an hour or whatever you have of your time to discuss the company AST SpaceMobile, because I think there's a great book to be written if you still have that in you. But even besides just the company, the startup, going from the startup stages in 2017 to where they are today, I think there's really great stories around the community as well that would put GameStop, deep value to shame if you're interested in writing that aspect of the story too. But I do think, like, you mentioned connectivity and Internet of Things. One of the things that's interesting about AST SpaceMobile is that they're building these large satellites that have high power. So if you can imagine, things like little air tags or other types of connected devices, whether that's robots, cars, autonomous trucks, what have you, drones. I do agree with you. The company's building a network that uses cellular spectrum, which allows it to, cellular spectrum gives you broad coverage and propagation, and you're able to basically use standard 3G PPD devices like an unmodified mobile phone or any other type of device. But I think it is a really interesting, unique approach, and it's what Starlink is working on today with direct to cell. But yeah, I'd love to spend some time with you to talk about the company, and happy to get you up to speed or answer any questions. But it's something that I myself and a number of people I see down here have spent probably, some of us 5 years, others perhaps 2 to 3 years. But yeah, it's a very interesting company, a lot of personalities, a lot of great stories that I think would be great for people to hear if they're interested.
Aren't they? They're based in Midland, Texas, right?
Yes, they're in Midland, Texas. That's right.
How bizarre! I grew up there, which is odd. And why did they end up in Midland?
They got a special deal from the city of Midland, because I think there was an old Air Force runway and hangar there, and they were able to get a really great deal on that. And so they have this large facility, and then they just purchased more production facility near, I think, in Odessa. And so, they just, Ted Cruz has been a big backer of the company, and they've gotten all these, tax breaks and incentives, I believe. And so, yeah, that's where they ended up. They do have their corporate office in Miami. But yeah, everything, all the secret sauce is happening in Midland.
All right. Well, we might have to go do a video episode there. You're talking me into it. I want to go back to my old stomping grounds. It's a good excuse. I don't know how many people on here have been to Midland. I mean, it's like,
yeah,
it's a weird place to put much of anything, let alone a tech company.
Well, it's funny because T-Mobile put out a commercial recently touting all the great things that they're doing, and they used Billy Bob Thornton in the commercial. And part of it is he talks about like how Starlink, their direct to cell, is going to launch service later this year, and that they've got so many satellites up in space. And part of the difference between the two companies is that Starlink uses smaller antenna type of satellites to communicate with your mobile phone, and that at least today provides like sporadic texting. But in that commercial, he talks about, our competitors have less than 10 satellites up in the sky. And so he kind of, it's a dig at AST SpaceMobile. But what was interesting is that, he has a cowboy hat on, he's walking out in Texas. And if you do a little bit of digging, he's in a show currently called Landman, which is actually based off of Wildcatters in the Permian Basin in Midland. And it just happens that AST SpaceMobile is there. And so it's just kind of funny how you've got this like witty competition between the companies too, where even in a commercial like that, they're clearly using this stick to poke at AST SpaceMobile.
That is funny. My dad was a landman. That's why I lived in.
Cool.
Yeah.
So you're an oil guy, or your family was.
I'm an oil man.
Yeah, a lot of riches and a lot of wealth squandered digging holes, right?
Yeah, when I grew up there in the 80s, and I think it had more billionaires per capita than any city on earth. It's a very, it's like Friday Night Lights. It's a small place.
All right, right. Well, yeah, no, it's great meeting you, and maybe I'll just reach out to you via direct message. But yeah, thanks for taking the time. We all really appreciate it.
Okay, thanks. Yeah. Oh, I'm in. You sold me. I'll go out there.
Awesome. Mission accomplished. It was I didn't know how like much, because I remember you telling me before, like you needed a little recharge time from all the base constantly. I mean, for people who don't know, that you had like you actually were thinking of doing a video series instead of the movie you did, and you had video on like 10 different companies, and yeah, it was years of it, right?
It was probably 7 years. Yeah, I mean, I still have some of this footage. I think I'm the only person ever, the only reporter for sure ever to get a camera into Ukraine, into the old Ukrainian, the ICBM factories where they also make rockets, and the secret rocket engine testing sites in the forests right outside of Dnipro. And we did some really cool stuff with spin launch before. I'm sure I have the only footage of like the first centrifuge they built in an office building in Sunnyvale. It was insane. It was just like in a suburban office park. They had, it was pretty close to the fastest spinning machine in the world, hurling projectiles into a wall, and the whole like neighborhood would shake. And we had a ton of stuff with OneWeb. I went to French Guiana for a couple launches with Greg Weiler and Richard Branson. I filmed, in India, all kinds of stuff. Yeah, so we were trying to do a multi-part series. There's a lot of drama involved, where I raised money. My original director partner that I was working with kind of went off the rails midway through the project, and the project, was kind of dead, and just had to revive it. Everybody had passed on it. HBO had passed already, and then I kind of tricked them into, they forgot that they had passed. And I ended up reselling it to them. So yeah, it was an adventure, and I just got kind of like burnt out on space. I've been working on an OpenAI book for like the last 2.5 years, inside of OpenAI, and I'm still like a little scarred by space, but I of all the companies, I just see people paying so much attention to ASTS, and the Midland part of it intrigues me.
You're free to go. I'm from Pitt. I really appreciate the time.
Okay. You guys are all so nice. Like, this is a very friendly audience.
Great. So I figured I'd take us back to SpaceX. I know it's privately traded, but there's a lot of ways to get access to these shares, and it seems like more and more these days. On the one hand, I'm extremely excited about Starlink and the potential there, but then on the other hand, I'm kind of confused how I think about a company, potentially shoveling a ton of their money into Mars, and like what the return on that. Do you have any thoughts on if Mars is investable, and like what the business case side of that would look like?
I don't know. You have to be on like Brian Johnson's program, I think, for Mars to be investable. For that to work out for you, you'd have to live a long time. No, I mean, look, the Mars stuff is that's the dream, right? I mean, it's investable, maybe in the same way that like heading off as an explorer hundreds of years ago was investable if you're really lucky and you hit upon something, I guess, that you can get back. But I still think they will get stuff to Mars in the relatively nearish future, just in terms of getting things back, setting up any kind of like economy that made revenue for that. I just have trouble. I have trouble seeing it. Yeah, I think SpaceX is really. I guess it's not lucky because you make your own luck, but without Starlink, I think Starlink went faster and ended up being an even bigger market than really anybody would have guessed. And without that, I mean, it's hard to see how SpaceX would be anywhere near as valuable as it is. And then I just think the Mars stuff, it's fun to think about and it's inspiring, but I have trouble seeing the business case there.
Similar boat to me then. Okay. Yeah. Thanks. I'm just trying to wrap my head around if that's something I could see myself investing in.
I mean, SpaceX's value, the only way it even almost makes sense is just through Starlink as this global telecommunications company, the likes that we've never seen. I think if Starship ends up working, that probably would unlock industry in low Earth orbit and the moon in ways that are unfathomable at the moment, and would be a real business as this like workhorse of industry and infrastructure. But like launch in general, even if you get the cost down on launch, it's just you're an airplane, right? I mean, it's just not a high profit business. So you have to have the other thing that's attached to it to make any sense.
Yeah, you gotta have the thing that you're gonna what's the thing, the product, the one at the end of it. It's, the product isn't the satellites, the information up there.
It's got to be data or a service or you're obviously if you were mining something, all of that starts to make sense. But I mean, when Elon tells you that he wants to get Starship down to, what does he say these days, like $10 million or something? I mean, where's the profit in just you're getting like how much money are you getting per launch for that? I mean, it has to be.
Yeah, the ROI on it is already going to be like, you need to do thousands of launches if it's going to be down there. The cost maybe to them internally might get to the, sub $30 million mark someday, but I don't feel like that anytime soon they're going to be charging that to their customers.
No, it is. I mean, to your point there, I mean, it is the craziest thing ever that SpaceX cornered the market on launch and satellites, and nobody else has any sort of response to this. I mean, OneWeb, I remember talking to Greg Weiler like way before Starlink was announced. He was totally ahead on the space internet idea, and I've written about this. I mean, I think I know Elon pretty much got his space internet idea from Greg, and at one point was going to go into business with Greg, and by all rights in a different world, OneWeb would have owned this thing and been racing ahead, but like SpaceX just crushed it with the rockets, and then Planet was the only company that had figured out even remotely how to mass manufacture satellites, and it took SpaceX. They definitely had stumbles on the way to figuring that out with Starlink, but man, now they've got it dialed in. I think the Starlink antenna factory is probably, is the largest consumer electronics factory in the entire United States now, is my guess. And I don't even think that's wrong. And it's like the scale advantage that SpaceX has been able to push across those different fronts. That's a lot for other people to compete with, and it's just sort of like miraculous to pull that off. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the company is more than one man, but it's hard to even if people don't like somebody personally, it's hard to like doubt it, what they've been able to accomplish and what him as at the lead has been able to do all of it. I know it's a whole host of people, and I'm sure like Glenn Stillwell does a really good job at managing a company as well. But it's just crazy, yeah. All the different things they've been able to pull out.
People do not get it. They still don't get it. It's like the United States would be. I mean, look, I've had many run-ins with Elon and like have those feelings that other people have on a very personal level, and I get the Elon of it all, but it's like people do not understand where the United States would be without SpaceX. We would be losing our minds as China was just barreling over us on such like an important critical piece of defense and infrastructure and strategy and just like unreal. And the fact that I know 20 years like kind of seems like a long time, but geez, it's really not. And it was crazy to see, somewhere around like 2016 where all of a sudden the Falcon 9s start coming out of the factory a lot more and landing. And man, I don't think it's just unbelievable to see an entire industry flip like that, where this company just became so incredibly dominant. It's wild. And Rocket Lab should get just immense credit for figuring a lot of this out and being competitive. I mean, look at how much time has passed and there is still not really like a third player. I mean, Blue Origin's like just kind of like getting to the edge of being involved. So this stuff is really hard. And yeah, anyway, sorry, that's my sermon for the day.
No, it's good. I appreciate it. I know we're at a little over an hour mark, so I keep feeling good. Do you want to keep going? So I got one more kind of fun question.
Yeah, I'm happy to keep going if there's questions.
All right. So my kind of thing is just I know this kind of bounced around a few times and around the community at least, and I kind of brought it up in your interview with Peter Beck, but we obviously none of us know when the launch is going to be. But if there was, I know there's a lot of investors that are trying to get kind of over to Wallup's area in the fall sometime. What are your thoughts or feelings around either at the launch or maybe at some sort of pre-investor party or something like that? Do you have any
of timing or attending? No, I'm attending. Yeah. I'm gonna attend. I mean, I've been invited to this like brisket rocket bash on Twitter, which I've like fully committed to.
Sweet. All right. I was going with that. I was just trying to ease in the question because we don't know the exact day yet. But,
I don't know the date either. I'm so emotionally scarred by delays in aborted rockets. Where I sat in Kodiak, Alaska for weeks, waiting for this Astra rocket to go. I think I'll never quite get over that. So, I don't know. I don't book my tickets for rocket launches until the last possible moments because, just learned to prepare myself for disappointment. I don't want to rain on everybody's parade, but it's pretty rare that these things happen on time.
No, it's good to know. It's a good like check on everybody. How retail investors get very spooked very quickly sometimes. It's frustrating. Whatever the company, whatever it is. If something is like slows down by a week, it's the sky is falling. So I don't know. So if you're out to launch, then maybe this kind of retail party that we might have over there would be great to have you there at some point. I don't know. Yeah, we'll talk offline, but I just wanted to make sure I got that out in there. If you're
no, I don't.
The brisket's real. The brisket's happen.
I mean, as a Texan, that sealed the deal pretty quick. And then I rarely say no to a rocket launch. At one point I was like, I'd been to so many of these launch sites, I started thinking of doing like a rocket launch tourism business, because you there's so much cool they're always in such weird places. Like French Guiana is bizarre. The Indian rockets, at least some of them, launched from this little island, Sriharikota. It's so weird. Obviously, Rocket Lab down in New Zealand has like the most spectacular launch site you could ever imagine. Kodiak was cool. Yeah, I always thought this would be an awesome little like adventure business, but you'd be so screwed at how pissed people would be when the rocket didn't launch if you had to like talk your way through that. It seemed kind of daunting, but yeah, I had a wild like 6 years getting to see all this stuff. I think people should go for the adventure if they have the chance. They're fun things to go do.
You're over in the Greater Silicon Valley area now, right?
Yeah, I'm right by Stanford.
Okay, cool. Palo Alto. Cool. All right, that's an awesome area. Yeah. My plan is for maybe it'll be fall, winter, sometime is I'm doing like a cross country road trip, and I'm gonna go camp. I got my rooftop pet and everything. I'm just gonna be what is it, like a groupie? I'm gonna go do my rocket tourism like Peter back then. I'm gonna hit up Texas and Florida and I'm gonna be there for launch. So that's my plan. I'm gonna be a rocket groupie like this Grateful Dead.
It's pretty fun. Yeah, it's good.
Yeah. Hey, Ashlee, you're just talking about some of the weird and wonderful places there. I know from your book you had been to Dnipro in the Ukraine there, to the Pifton Mesh factory. Can you just give us some thoughts on that? I mean, it's a massive complex that churned out, thousands and thousands of the ICBMs and other stages for various rockets there. Just give us some memory of that, just for a little color. It'd be great.
Oh, it was one of the coolest trips I've ever been on. Sure. Well, I don't want to get into. I have no idea why I was allowed to do it, other than I know Max Polyakov, but I don't know. I don't want to know what Max did to make it possible for me to walk into that building. But as a kid who grew up during the 80s in the Cold War, it was so wild. Okay, I'll tell you two things. So out in the forest a little bit, I don't know, from memory, it's like 20 minutes outside of Dnipro. You're kind of driving along, and then you get to this very not spectacular gate, and there's just kind of like two dudes at this quite rinky-dink gate, and I showed them my passport and they let me drive through, and then we went this was for the forest where they have the giant rocket test stand. I should post like the photos of this someday. I mean, it's this test stand is enormous. It's got like the whole trench for the flame to go through is dug into the forest, and all of the machinery on the test stand is still from the 1960s. Nothing has changed. The wiring, it's unbelievable. I will post these photos for everyone. I'll do it tomorrow. I mean, it's unbelievable. The wiring is just straight out of the 1960s. It's like a work of art. And when I was talking to this guy there, I mean, it's like depressing, right? There's most of the people that work there, I would say, were in their like, I don't know, like late 60s, early 70s, and they're very nice. I was talking to a guy there. I mean, he told me, like in its heyday at that test stand, it's a massive complex. There would be like 50,000 people, and I think they were down to like 2,000 people, and I think even that was like sort of for show and just to give people jobs so they didn't go sell secrets to the North Koreans or something like that, because I don't really think they had that much to do, and so that was amazing. And then you get to like more the center of Dnipro, and you go through this kind of like iron gate to get to the ICBM factory, and yeah, that was this huge complex. But I remember we drove our car in, and right as we're like parking to have our passports checked, there was like two guys in a tractor that also was from like, I think maybe like the 1950s, just puttering along through this huge complex in this old tractor. I mean, it's like hard to wrap your head around. And then we went into the facility. They didn't let me into like whatever's left of the ICBM part, but we went into Yuzmash's, where they were still building rockets, right? Like, what were they doing? Like parts of at least one stage, I think, for the Antares rockets, and Yuzmash had to like find a way to make money on other things. So there was like a bus manufacturing line right next to the rocket manufacturing line, and then just off to the side, I think it was like an electric shaver manufacturing line. And like all the people in there were in their late 60s, 70s. There were women at these like kind of like administrative sort of desks. I mean, those desks were straight out of the 1960s. It was like going back in time. It's crazy. I just been in Shenzhen right before I got there, and like Shenzhen could not be more the city of the future. It's probably the most futuristic city on earth. I had just seen like every building in the downtown of Shenzhen with their LEDs all lit up doing this giant show. And then I got on this plane and it felt like I'd gone back in time by like 50 years. I went through a portal. It was very strange, but it was one of the best experiences of my life. And I wrote a lot about Max in the book. He's one of my favorite characters of all time. I mean, just like a larger than life figure. And we went out to a dinner there with him at night, and I don't think, well, whatever, I'm going to tell the story. Sometimes you go to a dinner and like, if people are into their wine, they have a few bottles of wine if it's a nice restaurant all laid out. Max is into Oban Scotch, and he almost bought the whole Oban distillery. And so I walked in this restaurant. I think we were having dinner for like 10 people. I think there were 12 bottles of Oban just on this tray, and the waiter was just, the second you had a sip out of your glass, was bringing it back. And I sort of like lived that life with Max for like, Max has some like less than pristine aspects to his life, I will grant that, but what was done to him was criminal and like disgusting. And I'm sure, well, I don't want to like libel anyone. I think some large aerospace contractors, traditional aerospace contractors, were probably behind what happened to Max and wanted to wrest the control of Firefly away from him. And yeah, I think it was gross and was like unpatriotic. And I find it hard to it's unclear to me why someone like Yuri Milner, and this is not a dig on Yuri Milner, but it's like, how come this Russian guy can invest in every major internet company at the core of our infrastructure, but a Ukrainian dude can't own a rocket company? I don't understand it. And I think Max's plan was to like, Dnepro is full of engineering talent and like so much history. And, his plan was probably like too far-fetched to ever work. But this idea of like taking all the Soviet aerospace talent and bringing it to Texas was like, I think, genius. And then obviously, like in hindsight, good Lord, when the war broke out, who knows where those people went? And, the North Koreans and the Iranians had been trying to recruit them all for years, and Max was the only person that actually had a plan to do anything about it. So anyway, I think Max it's sad that he's anyway, I'm happy that I wrote about that in the book and that it's there if anyone wants to go find it.
Yeah, no, it was. I mean, yeah, I don't know, because I think when I read the book, it was at the war, it had broken out when you like published it or a little bit after. But when I was reading the book, the war was still fairly fresh and new. Not that it's fresh and new now, but it was, I don't know, it hit me hard. Sorry, I'm rambling, but there was one other guest that like people wanted to come up.
I have two questions. What is, if Ashlee, first of all, I read the book and saw the movie and all the rest, and congratulations, it's amazing work. I really love the section about Max, and I have a question: if you've kept in touch, if you know, during the war, is he having any kind of role or anything like that, or like what is he trying to do? If you know that, that's like one question. The other one is regarding Peter Beck. In the book, you note something that I kind of sort of gathered from like listening to him, and it's hard to tell like what he wants, in the sense that like with Musk or even Gwen Shotwell, it's like they have this thing about going to Mars, and it might not work out or it might not make sense, but they have like this sort of goal that's really clear and really strong, like a direction. With Peter, he likes to say he holds his cards close to the vest, and he does. But is there like a beyond the horizon objective that you think he has, or that you in these this time since you've written the book, that you see maybe a little more clear, like where he really wants to go, sort of, or is he just basically wants to run out, like he says, a successful business?
It's a great question. I mean, I like chased this for years because I just didn't believe, I just couldn't believe that someone who's that driven, I thought there must be something else lurking, right? And either Peter is just like fantastic about having this poker face, or there just isn't. I'm not convinced there's something else there. I think Peter was driven, I think, first and foremost by what we talked about before, that he's just compelled to build these things. And I think that's what got him started in all this. I think for sure there's a part of him that wanted to be a successful business person and to make some money. Am I saying that like getting rich was his primary driver? Absolutely not. Making the thing, doing the engineering, I mean, that's what's like in his soul and he was bred to do. But did he want to get rich? Yeah, I think so. And I think you could argue maybe some of his callings feel like more pedestrian than when you see Elon, raging about. So I've hunted this for a very long time. There's something that I I don't want to taunt you guys too badly. I'm going to do it twice. There's something that's not 100% yet at all, but I might be chasing, that's Peter related, and it convinces me. Oh God, I'm a terrible tease because I really can't say much. It sort of convinces me that Peter's primary driver really is just engineering amazing objects that go very fast, and I think that's what he likes to do, and I think he just wants to make his rockets. And I don't think he's really. I think what he says, he wants to, increase access to space. I think that's what he wants to do. So I haven't been able to come up with anything better, despite trying very hard. And then on Max, yes, I'm going to be a tease again. I mean, right when the war broke out, Max was the sort of the primary person that was able to obtain a ton of satellite imagery for the Ukrainian government and to help gather and analyze that imagery that, at least to some degree, stopped the initial siege on Kyiv from working. I think you can argue that pretty strongly. They were keeping such close tabs on the Russians. I think the Russians totally underestimated how much satellite imagery would come in and how effectively it would be used. And then it ended up just being a total morale killer for the Russians as the world saw their convoys stuck on these roads, and instantly the Russian army seemed less scary than it had been. So as time went on, Max has received a handful of awards from the Ukrainian government for his work on that stuff. There's other bits and pieces that I'm sorry I can't tell you yet, but they are fascinating. And when Max is in less personal danger will be revealed. How about that?
That sounds really fascinating and good answer. I just want to make a really brief comment on. I've noticed that Neutron is pretty fat, which tells me it's very easily stretched. It's a 7 meter diameter, so I don't know, and maybe you don't know either, or you can't say, but I have the feeling there's a few pretty obvious cards up Peter's sleeve in terms of Neutron's future capacity.
I mean, I would I would guarantee Peter has cards up his sleeve. He always does.
I was gonna say, from your interview with him, you asked about the size, and then he said you stretch the body in the tanks would be pretty elementary or something quite close to those words. So I think that there's if they needed to go for a heavier lift, or not saying heavy lift, but heavier. He said in your interview, so I don't think anybody can train anything by saying that.
I felt bad about that interview in hindsight. It was like I couldn't decide how much I should assume people already knew about Peter versus not knowing about him. You know what I mean? When you've spent this much time like reporting on someone, it was like really hard to tell what the baseline is. I've been anyway. This is neither here nor there. I've been thinking about it a lot.
All right, you've got a couple of the retail investors saying you're a little too hard on them, but
No, I don't think it was hard on Peter. Peter could take it. And then I feel like I wish he'd done it in person. It's so funny. Like he's different with me when we're not in public. I wish Peter would be the same sort of less buttoned up, chatty Peter when we're doing things like that. Is I think I can make more progress. Thank you. Yeah. Do you want me to? You were saying
I was gonna start good, but I feel like you could do it much better.
Yeah. Cool. Yes. Please go to corememory.com. We got a Substack. It'd be great if people are into science and tech and learning things. We got the Core Memory podcast on every platform you can imagine. And then we're doing tons of awesome videos on our YouTube channel, which is also Core Memory. And so, yeah, any support, is appreciated. I think there's got to be something for this audience. There's got to be something there between the stories, the podcast, and the videos for everyone, I think.
And soon to be announced is ASTS documentary, and I'm not gonna just put any strings on it, but I'm excited to hear how that goes. You guys, keep us in the loop. We're excited.
Cool. Yeah, I think, well, and also I should say thank you everyone for your time, and then for all the kind words about the book and the movie. It's really appreciated. I thank you.
It's genuine. Trust me, it's genuine. You got a lot of fans in the retail community. So, with that, we'll wrap up tonight, guys. Again, I really appreciate all the speakers coming up tonight, and thanks for the dialogue conversation. It's a little different than normally too. We'll double down on current events next week. So thanks for everybody ask questions and comments and stuff, or I'll try to get to them after the show. And again, Ashlee, huge thanks for coming on. It's been awesome to talk to you.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Ashlee. Thanks, guys.